I did this video a couple of times last year. You guys really liked it. What essentially we're doing here is we're getting out ahead of the waiver wire and the rest of the league mates by going through next week's early top 12 defense rankings to give you guys that edge leading into the playoff race. And I'm one of the only fantasy YouTubers who covers defense multiple times a week. So make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, getting into our first tier, this feels relatively easy right out of the gate, with the Seahawks definitely at number one at Tennessee. This matchup doesn't get a whole lot better than this. They get the Rams this weekend, which I do think is a real big bloodbath. So it's basically a mini bye week, essentially, when they go to Tennessee to take on the disgusting Titans. I mean, we haven't seen what the Titans look like out of the bye week, but we know what they look like before the bye week, which is they're not getting touchdowns because they don't have enough talent. And they're turning the ball over because Cam Ward doesn't look very good in his rookie year. They're also not protecting Cam Ward up front, which is bad news against the Seahawks front seven, who has been obliterating offensive lines this whole year. And they're also a very turnover-happy defense that's super aggressive at the point of attack. It doesn't feel like it gets a whole lot easier than the Seahawks defense next week. The Ravens defense is at 2 to round out this first tier. And I will say I'm a little bit nervous about this one versus New York Jets. Listen, it's not that I think the Jets are going to be some dominant offense all over again, right? Like, the only thing that really concerns me here is that the Jets are coming off basically a mini bye week since they played last night on Thursday Night Football versus New England. I do think there's a little bit of an advantage here to the Jets from a, matchup perspective, but it is at home in Baltimore, and we don't know what they're going to look like against the Browns this week, but we know the Ravens defense has definitely turned it up. They're getting more sacks. They're getting more pressure on the quarterback. Their secondary looks a lot better. So I do think they're on the right trajectory, and they could be a tier 1 defense for me next week. But I'm a little uncertain about this one, so we'll have to see how the weekend goes. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got the Packers defense versus Minnesota at number 3. This is a divisional game, and I do think a lot of weird things can happen in these divisional type of matchups. The Packers obviously offensively have looked really bad, but what has been keeping them afloat in these games recently has been their defense. Their defense has not been the problem. It's completely on the offense. So I do think that against the Vikings, which is a team that not only isn't scoring many points with J.J. McCarthy at quarterback, but J.J. is also turning the ball over too. Like, this is, any way you look at this one, I don't see how the Packers defense isn't a good play as long as they can get some health, right? Because they have currently Micah Parsons a little bit banged up with injury. They've got some injuries to that front seven. So I do think that this is a big week, and we'll see what the health of that squad looks like. But against the Minnesota Vikings, I'm just leaning towards the Packers pretty heavily in this one. The Texans defense at number 4, and they take on Buffalo. So this might be a shock to a lot of people. They're playing on Thursday night as well. So that, if you follow the pattern, Thursday night defenses this year, for the most part, not been very good. However, we have had some good performances from Thursday night defenses of late, and the Texans is one of the best. I mean, again, I've been saying this for many weeks at this point. The Seahawks defense, the Broncos defense, and the Texans defense are 3 elite defenses in the league. The Texans defense does everything right. They get sacks, they pressure your quarterback, they have 10 interceptions on the year, they're extremely physical at the point of attack. Like, this is a really good defense. Now, why are they number 4 against the Buffalo Bills offense? That does feel a little out of place. Well, if you look at the Bills and what their situation looks like heading into this weekend alone, Kincaid's already been ruled out. Khalil Shakir, their second option, is dealing with injury as well. Now, he may end up playing, but I don't like this situation coming off a short week and then going to Houston. That's not a good place to play, and I do think that if they don't get healthy, and especially if they can't get Kincaid back, they could be stopped offensively, and Josh Allen could have a little bit of a tougher night. So I like the Texans at 4 for now. And then the Vikings defense at 5 to round out this tier. Again, they're going to Green Bay. This could be going down several different ways, because I refuse to admit the Vikings defense isn't good. They're very good. Like, they have personnel, and they've got one of the best defensive coordinators in football. Their problem is offense. It's making their defense look bad because their defense, the dam breaks on a good, even the best defenses, the dam breaks when your offense can't move the ball. And that's what they've been dealing with. So what happens if both defenses don't break, right? and there's just a low scoring game. I do think it's possible in this one, and considering how bad Green Bay has looked offensively, I do think that there's a lot of potential here that it's a low scoring game, and both defenses are viable in fantasy football. So probably something changes in this matchup right here, depending on how they both look this weekend. But I do think right now, I've got no other choice but to do this ranking right here with both of these defenses inside the top 5. And the whole point of this video, guys, is to make sure that you can get out ahead of your league mates by picking these defenses up the waiver wire early. And that's exactly where our automatic waiver tool comes into play, because there's always a mad dash at 3 in the morning when priority waiver claims run, and you can get all those top remaining free agents for free. Our system automates that process so you can sleep through the night this weekend and not have to worry about waking up at 3 a.m. I value sleep very heavily. I don't know about you. I love my sleep. And I think most people would agree. That's why we made this tool for you guys, to make sure your automated waiver process is enabling you to sleep through the night. Also, with the premium subscription, you get access to my weekly top 250 rankings, and you get access to the league sync up feature on our site and the comparison tool on our site. And if you just want a full team breakdown from me, personalized advice, trade ideas, waiver ideas to make your team better and ready for a deep playoff run, you can also get a team breakdown from me as well. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we've got a little bit of a bigger situation here where I've got a little bit of a lack of trust. The Browns defense is at 6 currently, and they're going to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders in week 12. So I just kind of look at this one and I say to myself, good defense, definitely, against an offense that hasn't done very well in recent weeks. This seems like kind of a slam dunk. And maybe they should even be inside of tier 2. Maybe they will be next week. But the reason I'm not doing that yet is because the Browns they're a bad team themselves. So we just don't know what to expect on a weekly basis, especially as the year goes by and the Browns continue to just have no shot to make the playoffs. At what point does the team quit? So that does factor into my decision making, especially with these really bad teams later in the year. And that's the point that we're at here. So if the Browns get their butts handed to them by the Ravens this week, what's the likelihood that they come out really dominant against the Raiders? And what if the Raiders play really well? So that's the reason I'm kind of mitigating risk here at 6 right now. But as of now, I do think the Browns have room to move up. The Lions defense at number 7, they're taking on the Giants at home. So here's my thing with the Giants, right? I think a lot of people will want to put this one higher because the Lions defense has had really good games this year. They've also had bad games though, and their defense is not fully healthy. And really the ultimate reason I'm kind of reluctant to put the Lions much higher than this right now is because the Giants with Jackson Dart, they do have electricity. Now, I think Jackson Dart he's obviously going to miss this game. Probably returns against the Lions. And I do think it's going to be interesting to watch this team post Brian Daboll. But I do still think Jackson Dart has really caught the league off guard this year and probably is able to score more points. But at the end of the day, if you can get a turnover or 2 off this offense, which is very possible, I do still think you have room to be in the top 10. The Bills defense also makes it in the top 10 in that Thursday night game versus Houston. It's in Houston. I do not like that. But what I do like here, and this is something I've bet on all year, it's very hard for me to not put a defense that's facing the Texans offense in the top 12 at this point. They have no offensive line, and they're actually losing their best pieces on the offensive line. It's crazy. Like their best offensive linemen, they're missing. And it's like, well, how is it going to work? I mean, it didn't work for the first half against the Jags last week, but then they ended up mounting that big comeback. We'll see what happens this weekend against the Tennessee Titans. I don't think that's going to be much of a game you could take much context away from. This is going to be a game that's interesting, though, because the Bills defense has had weeks where they look pretty dominant themselves. So I do think this could be one of those games. The Bills do probably need to win this game in all likelihood. It's a must win for them at this point. So I do think the Bills probably end up as a top 10 play because they generate pressure on probably CJ Stroud coming back at that point, and they may be forced a turnover or 2. The Chiefs defense, also inside my top 10 at number 9 versus the Indianapolis Colts. So, couple moving parts here, right? I'm big on the Chiefs defense this week alone because they're coming off a bye week. And that team off a bye week is very, very dominant with Andy Reid. The Chiefs defense also has had some pretty sneaky good performances this year in fantasy football. And typically when we get to this time of the year, that's when I like the Chiefs defense more. I trust Steve Spagnuolo, that defensive coordinator, more than I trust most defensive coordinators. So I do think that at this point, Kansas City is kind of in this position to where everything is a must-win for them. And I do think, if you think about it, the last 2 games we've seen with Daniel Jones, he has morphed into a werewolf, aka the Giants version of himself. And I think the Chiefs see that and they're going to attack it. Now, the Colts, they've got an advantage because they're coming off a bye week, which would put them in an advantage. And if they weren't coming off a bye week, I probably would have the Chiefs higher. But I still see things that are good with the Chiefs defense for fantasy for 2 straight weeks. Dropping down to our last tier, we've got the Raiders defense at number 10. And you can clearly see why there's a massive tier break here. The Raiders defense is obviously not one that you want to invest much in because that's a very sketchy play. They're playing the Browns though, and I said this earlier, you've got 2 teams in this matchup who are basically finished. So what team is more motivated? Well, I can tell you this, I did see a lot of fight out of the Raiders the last 2 games. And the Browns, on the other hand, they just lost to the Jets. So I do think that there's a potential here that the Raiders actually do well against the Browns. Because from a defensive perspective, again, all any defense has to see is what Dylan Gabriel looks like and realize, oh, we just have stacked the box against Quinshon Judkins, and they're over. I think Pete Carroll is smart enough to realize that. So I do have the Raiders inside my top 12 because of that reason. The Bears defense is at 11 and the Steelers defense is at 12. So they're taking on each other in Chicago. This matchup is interesting. I find this one fascinating because here's a couple things for you. The Bears defense, first of all, they've actually done really well in fantasy because they can generate turnovers. They've got a lot of interceptions on this year. 13 to be exact through 9 games. That's insane. More than 1 interception per game is absolutely crazy work. 21 sacks through 9 games, it's an okay number, but they force fumbles as well. They just generate turnovers, which has been a problem recently for Aaron Rodgers. Now, on the other hand, Pittsburgh with Aaron Rodgers, I could see this one going in their favor because Aaron Rodgers has historically owned the Bears and history matters here. So I do think that both defenses are in this weird position to where I kind of want to lean towards the Bears because the Bears have momentum right now. The Steelers have the opposite of that. They have no momentum. They actually have bad momentum. But I do still think there's something to this Aaron Rodgers owning the Bears argument that could line up good for the Steelers and maybe get in their heads a little bit and make the Bears offense play bad. And we all know this, the Steelers defense is prone to forcing a lot of turnovers. I think it could happen in this game, and that's why they're both inside the top 12 right now. So let me know what you think of next week's rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see this week's top 12 defense rankings, click on this video right here.